You said you were half Filipino too, right?
Yeah, are you?
Yeah, I'm half Filipino.
No way!
What's your story? What's your sign? It's like we're twin flames in a different life.
Welcome to the Queer in Alberta TikTok series / potential podcast. My name is Kelsey. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I identify just as a queer woman.
My name is Kaine. I am from Banff, Alberta, and I go by he, they pronouns. I am an apprentice piercer.
And I don't actually know that much about what the world of tattooing and piercing is like, so this is going to be a pretty cool conversation to have.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, like a lot more than people really kind of think or even know. It's pretty cool, especially getting to learn all of the ins and outs of the industry and meet a lot of really talented and creative people, especially because the shop that I work at does a lot of guest spots. So we have people coming from kind of all over the place, and it's been a really, really awesome journey.
And had you always known that that was kind of what you wanted to fall into or do for work?
I wanted to do something artistic, so I started in the arts with film and photography. Money kind of had to be a priority because being an adult in life is expensive, unfortunately, and the arts don't pay as well as most people would like. Got really tired of that, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna move to the mountains. I have this opportunity. I've always had an interest in piercing. I always wanted to make sure that people are getting the correct information because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and just somewhere safe that they can go and have somebody that they can trust with their bodies. Even yesterday we had somebody and her poor septum was pierced so high and we had to take it out, and she was crying and I almost started crying because I was just like, I feel so bad for you. If you had a little bit more knowledge, that could have been avoided. So that's kind of what got me interested in doing piercing.
One thing from your original submission where you were just telling me about yourself that you mentioned is, I have it here on the side, I can read it. You mentioned exactly that. You were talking about the importance of being able to feel safe and supported wherever I go, and you want your clients to feel exactly that. And I think with a queer context as well, that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in more conservative provinces like Alberta, because that was one thing that I was kind of worried about. But one thing that I did notice is that I think because it's so conservative and all of our community is kind of worried about that, it makes the community that much tighter here. They're there to support each other and they're there to love each other, and that's something that I just really did not see in the Ontario queer community. The thing with the shop too is recently we started to add a spot on our forms to let people let us know if they have preferred pronouns or a preferred name, because obviously, unfortunately, we do need their legal name on the forms. I kept noticing people being like should I put my name or my legal name, and I'm like, sorry. Kind of have to put both. While yes, we do need their legal name, that they can still put their preferred name and pronouns.
And that's so awesome. I interviewed a teacher actually from Edmonton, and they were telling me about how they start off their year with their students with a Google form. What is your name? And then what is your preferred name? Who can I use it with? Who do you want me to not say it to? Or same thing with pronouns. And I think it's just such a huge piece of awareness that seems pretty new, but I'm really excited to even hear about it.
Yeah, I find it's just really helpful because some of the guys who work at the shop, they're supportive, but they're just, some things just they don't understand because they're not a part of it. So they're just I think they might not use the pronouns that I think they use, and I'm like, well, just ask them.
Yeah.
Just kind of getting everyone up to speed, because I can tell that they're I want to help, but I don't know how.
Would you say you're pretty supported? Even if they don't know what's going on, they want to try and learn?
Oh, 100%. So when I first started working there, I wasn't really out. I still had my old name, and I was still kind of allowing she pronouns, but so they've just been very supportive of that whole process. If they give me any time off that I need to go do a name change or go for a binder fitting. You know how a lot of workplaces, they're oh, we're a family, but then they're actually toxic? It's the opposite. We're actually a very loving family in this shop, and even my friends who have come by have noticed that.
I've experienced maybe like keeping my queerness as a separate part of my identity from like my work self when I'm like in the workplace, and the fact that you feel safe and supported to this degree is just like what everybody deserves, but so nice to see in Alberta.
Yeah, in Alberta, and unfortunately also kind of in the tattoo industry. A lot of the tattoo artists, like from the older generation, you can see a little bit of a rift, but like the newer generation, because like all of the guys at my shop, like they're about my age or younger, they're from my generation, and they don't really have that like old school like thought process necessarily.
Is it kind of like old boys club kind of thing?
It's kind of like a boys club. It's kind of, but I find like the newer generation of artists, they're just so open and understanding. It's really great like seeing the new generation of people being like, no, that's no longer acceptable. Like we need to get it.
Yes. I literally just have like my ears pierced. That's it. I have 0 tattoos, have not spent any time like in those spaces. So it's really interesting to hear that, you know, it's kind of like evolving in that sense and becoming a safe space for queer people.
Yeah, well, it has to, right? Because they're a big part of our clientele, whether people like it or not. You want to give them that space because it's like, A, they're people, they deserve that regardless of who they are. And B, it's like they're going to come back if they feel safe with you.
Yeah.
We have people who have become regulars because they just feel like they're part of the team almost. They feel like they're part of the family. They come in, we're like, oh my God, hey, how's it going? I think one person's been in like every couple days for like the last 2 weeks.
Oh my God. I feel that way even with like queer baristas that I know in the city. I'll be like, hey bestie, it's me again. What's going on? Have that connection and like ease because you know that it's safe for you and it's a fun environment for you too. Not just like one that you have to, you know, like that extra layer, not just safe, but fun.
Customers are kind of everything, and like we want to have fun with you. We don't want to just like sit there, grind out our tattoos or piercings and then like go home. We want to like have fun with it. It's our passion. We love to do it.
And if I see like a pride flag, especially if it's a local business, I immediately kind of like think, yeah, this is probably like a cool place for me. It's going to be fun. And there's almost this kind of like distinction with that though, where you want to make sure it's not just like performative activism and you need to see it in like the actions of the business. Yeah. So I was wanting to ask you, like, how do you in your kind of like tattoo or piercing shop environment, and what's the operative term? What do you call it?
We just say like shop environment, tattoo piercing studio. It really depends on who you ask.
Like this is just me as a little anthropologist trying to figure out what terms to use and etc. So that's just me nerding out, my bad.
For the shop in general, we don't have a little flag in the window or anything. I think it more just shows through how we interact with our customers. Having me there probably helps because I'm just very flamboyant.
It's
so like, oh well, if this piercer's incredibly queer, then obviously they must be okay with it. It's just like the way that everyone interacts, because it's like it's not as if like, let's say a trans person comes in and they're just like, oh, like dancing around and being awkward. Like they treat them like any other person that walks into the shop because they literally, that's what they are. They're just a person.
You can go to Pride and there's lots of corporations, or even on social media, they'll have their like logo change for Pride Month and then not do anything for the versus like what you're doing every single day with your actions and like your teammates or coworkers' actions.
Actions speak way louder than words do.
You actually said something earlier that I really wanted to touch on. You talked about noticing a difference in the queer community in Alberta in terms of like close-knitness versus like in Ontario. Hearing that is so interesting because I think a lot of Albertans kind of have this idea that like it's super easy and fun and accessible to be gay in like big metropolis cities like, you know, Vancouver or Toronto. So that aspect of the community being closer here, that was just surprising.
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason too is because it's a smaller feel. Toronto and Vancouver, like they're a lot bigger cities, and like because there's so many people in the same area, just lets people like not have to feel as close-knit because they're just kind of like very open and accepted. Whereas here, we're spread a little thinner. It's a conservative province. So once people find each other, they really want to like stay with each other. Wow, these are amazing people. I feel like I'm seen. I feel like I'm heard. I've found people that actually understand me. It's such like a harder thing to find in Alberta. I feel like that's the reason why it's kind of more, it feels more close-knit to me at least.
As somebody that's only lived really in Alberta my whole life, I just never would have anticipated that, you know, what you're saying is exactly true. It's like every queer person that I've ever met in the province, for the most part, we instantly get along. We instantly kind of like become family and look out for each other and take care of each other and have each other. That's just such a wonderful thing that I think is a product of, you know, maybe more difficult location.
Even like going to Calgary and going to drag shows and stuff like that, like the second that I meet people, they're just like, oh my God, hello, you are mine now. You're a part of us. Yeah. You are one of us. And I was like, hi, I'm just a bean.
I love that. And so I think like any kind of queer Albertans who are watching this, they should feel very proud of themselves for that, because apparently it's not necessarily a universal quality. We're just kind of nice.
No, I find a lot of people in Toronto are very catty, but like that's just like broad spread too. Like it doesn't matter who, it's just Torontonians are mean.
We do just tend to adopt and take care of and have that found family aspect, it seems, wherever we go.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really nice too, because I find that a lot of us also don't necessarily grow up in families that are supportive or caring.
I've talked to so many people now, and it's very much like a spectrum of experiences in terms of family, where it's either like my parents were super accepting from even before I ever knew I was queer, to unfortunately some really hard stories. Found family is so key in getting through any of it. Especially
like with my family, it's a little bit weird. I feel like my dad supports me no matter what, just because like kind of the favorite.
Say it like it
is. There's people like my mother who they'll ask my pronouns and I'll tell them my pronouns, and then they just use the wrong ones anyway. And it's like, you're just doing this to get a rise out of me.
It takes more effort for someone to misgender you than it does to just use the correct pronoun. So it's a purposeful choice at that point.
Yeah, well, especially when you're going out of your way to literally ask. They're like, oh, so do you go by he, him pronouns now? And I go, well, it's actually he, they, but like, thank you for asking. And they're like, yeah, but she. And I'm like,
yeah, no she in there.
She just does stuff to get a rise out of me, and I just stop reacting. And you have to kind of treat her like a little kid. It's okay. My younger sister is wonderful, and like it has been whipping her into shape gradually as she gets older. It's amazing. She is the sassiest little thing, and I love it so much. I love it so much.
Aw, see, I relate to that. I have a younger brother who's, as you know, like 2.5 years younger, and he's been so important for that. Like my family, they know, but they're like very much like, we're going to ignore this aspect of your life and not talk about it. It's very taboo. But he's great about, you know, being that safe space for me where we can talk about it and it's free and it's not censored. Siblings and allies are everything in those kind of situations.
You said you were half Filipino too, right?
Yeah, are you?
Yeah, I'm half Filipino.
No way!
My dad's Filipino. He moved over here when he was like 13.
Oh my God, do you speak Tagalog?
No.
Same, bestie. Wow. Now that you've mentioned it, I was like, okay, I think like maybe, but I wasn't gonna say anything.
Yeah, I've got a very Filipino face.
Maybe it was different growing up in Ontario, but I have rarely met other people that are half Filipino, half Canadian, close to my age.
Yeah, I would say pretty much about the same. Like, I would meet like a lot of like half Japanese or like Korean, that kind of thing, but like very rarely half Filipino.
Yeah, okay, everything kind of makes sense for me personally.
My dad's Filipino. He's great. Doesn't really quite understand things, but I also haven't like straight up just been like, hey dad, just kind of like changed all my names and profiles, and if they notice, then that's cool. Especially once I start going on HRT and do the top surgery thing. You
seem to feel pretty like confident about it, or at least okay about it with your dad.
Yeah, like I said, I'm the favorite.
I love that.
So, I'm sorry to any of my siblings who might end up watching this.
The truth hurts. The truth hurts.
He's always just been super chill, and he just wants to see like any of his children just be happy and thriving, and that's what matters most to him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, well that's beautiful. My mother, she had a really hard time with me coming out. I told her like years before I told my dad. I think I was 18 when I came out to my mom, and then 23 when I came out to my dad. And he took it pretty like in stride, easy peasy, you know, beautiful cover girl kind of about it. But yeah, my mom to this day, it's still a very slow process. So I'm happy to hear that at least with your dad, it seems a little smoother.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure my mom still thinks my pansexuality is a phase, even though I came out at 14, but it's just a phase. I'm 30 this year, but it's just a phase.
I was wondering, would you be comfortable at all maybe like touching on your coming out story a little bit?
Yeah, I almost feel like I have a few different ones, because it's like I've just been coming out in different ways throughout like the entirety of my life. First, it started off with like me discovering like bisexuality when I was a very young teenager, having my parents just kind of brush it off as like, oh, it's a phase. And then kind of moving on to questioning a little bit more and playing around a bit more with gender. Also not really understanding a lot of it either, because like I didn't have a lot of access to like what any of it was. So I was like, oh, I'm androgynous. And then I was like, oh, that's actually non-binary. So like I've been using they, them pronouns for like years now. I moved out here and kind of had a lot more leeway, I guess, especially like a lot of the times I've noticed in the past, like looking back on all of it, I hyper presented as femme in very toxic relationships. And any times that I was single or in healthy relationships, I started presenting more masc. So I was just like, that is probably something. My counselor from Ontario, they referred me to a few out here, and one of them was Skipping Stone. So they've been incredibly helpful. They're a fantastic organization. Highly recommend them to anyone who is in like the Calgary, like Bow Valley area. And I kind of started talking with them and their counselors, and I was just like, you know, I've been considering doing HRT for a couple years now. I don't know what to expect or like even how to do it. There weren't really that many resources from what I knew back at where I lived.
Right.
They kind of got the ball rolling on that for me. My referral's in, I'm just waiting for the doctor to get a hold of me. And once I kind of like had been talking to them more, I was like, okay, I think I feel safe and comfortable enough to like change my names. So I changed it all on Facebook and like Instagram, all of my social media. I just kind of got like an outpour of like, hey, I noticed your name changed. Do you want me to start calling you by that? Also, like, did your pronouns change? They're still they. I'm trying out the he at that time. So many of my friends and like other family members that weren't like from the older generations, they're just like, yes, like absolutely, I'm loving this for you. And I was just like very touched to have that kind of support from the people around me. I was kind of really scared and like hemming and hawing about it for like a very long time. Having that kind of reaction has just been like so affirming and just makes me feel incredibly loved by the people around me.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, it definitely should. And like my mom made a kind of stupid offhand comment about the name change, but that was like honestly to be expected. She's probably the least supportive person in my life. Because like even when I was like, I'm gonna move to the mountains, she's like, yeah, but what if you fail? What if this goes wrong? What if this? What if that? And I'm just like,
even if it is kind of, you know, that's just the way that it is, or that's the way my mom is, it can still be a draining and hard thing to go through. And I'm sorry that that's your experience.
There's not much you can do. Like she has gotten a lot better in terms of how she used to be, but it's just one of those things where it's like there's not much I can do, and just kind of gotta keep rolling with the punches no matter how hard they punch.
One thing that you mentioned on your journey of like coming out that really stood out to me is may I ask, do you identify as trans then?
Yes.
Okay, for sure. But it seems like that aspect for you, like it's not uncommon to hear that like, you know, queer people kind of come out in stages as they learn about themselves and figure out their journey. But it seems like that part of yours was really like happening here in Alberta.
Very, very, very much so. And even like being out as non-binary, which is like, it's still trans, but it's not as generally accepted. Like obviously the queer community understands that, but like for the everyday like general populace, like they don't necessarily understand that like even though you're non-binary, you are still trans. Even though I was out technically, it was like a whole different coming out process, because it's like yes, I am going to be, getting top surgery and starting hormones and like all of that kind of thing. So medically transitioning has been like the big, I guess, next step. That whole part of the process has started out here. I considered doing it in Ontario, but another big part of it was I didn't have a practitioner, like a doctor, trying to get the resources that I needed, especially not knowing where, or not really knowing a whole lot of people who like had similar experiences. It was just a lot, and it just kept getting pushed onto the back burner, being just thousands of miles away from any issues that could potentially happen has just really been helpful in actually allowing me to feel comfortable in doing what I actually want to do in my life.
It makes sense too, that freedom aspect that you're talking about. And while you were speaking, I wrote that like, despite moving somewhere totally new and like really, you hadn't really been to Alberta previous to moving, hey?
No, so basically during the summer, I did a cross-country road trip from Ontario to Victoria and back. Nice. And then I stopped in Banff for a couple days. As I got closer and closer to Ontario, I started having like really bad nightmares, and I started having like this feeling of dread just like sinking into my soul. So when I got back, I didn't even want to go back to work because it was just a terrible work environment, and like I was having an existential crisis at that point. I was just like, you know what? No, like I'm going to start applying to jobs. There's that tattoo shop that I saw literal signs saying that they were hiring, and I was like, I took note of that. I was like, I see you, universe. Got the job that I wanted and just moved out here. I was back out here within 3 weeks of returning to Ontario.
Okay, well done. Boots on the ground. You said hustle. But what I wrote was that despite moving somewhere new, you found community and you found resources, and it sounded like it all happened very quickly to like push you into this new journey. Growing up in a world in a society that's super heteronormative, queer people often don't see themselves represented in media. You don't have the language to kind of maybe name what you're feeling right from the get-go. When did you first start to see non-binary or trans representation that made sense to you?
Definitely with Tumblr. Oh my god.
Okay, classic.
Well, because that's kind of where I started discovering like what non-binary and that like trans masc people exist. For some reason, I had gotten through my life till like the age of 18 without meeting anyone, a trans masc person. They were all just trans femme. I was just like, oh, there's actually people out there that feel this way and are like me. I have so much to think about. Then kind of moving forward, meeting more people in like real life, or even over the internet. More recently with TikTok, the For You page is the algorithm, I swear to God. Discovering the community more through like TikTok has just been like, I don't even have words for it. It's just been so incredibly helpful.
I died when you brought up Tumblr because you're not the first person to do it. It seems those of us that are like age bracket 25 through 30, it's like Tumblr was the place to be if you were a young person. Common theme in these interviews that if you do not maybe have representation in the media that is fed to you or shown to you when you're younger or in the environment that you're in, social media is for sure where young people seem to find it. Right now, you are creating incredibly valuable representation just by having this conversation with me. And even if only like 3 people see it, I hope it's 3 people that relate to your story.
Part of the reason why I wanted to do it, because it's like having more people have those kind of conversations and being able to see that from a younger age. It's like I probably would have been able to get here sooner.
If you could give maybe queer people that are going through a similar experience that you have in your life, you give them a piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't let anybody else hold you back. Don't let other people who've never taken a risk in their life dictate what you do. And it's advice that I need to take myself more often as well. For a lot of my life, I let people just push me around and beat me into a corner where I felt scared to do anything out of line. I was always alternative, and I kind of did beat to my own drum. I always had that like fear of, being a disappointment or, not being enough. Just be you. As cliched as that is, do what you want to do, and don't let fear hold you back.
Are you ready for your last question?
I am.
Okay. if you could go back in time and tell younger Kaine something as your present self today, what would it be?
Stay away from Leos. I'm sorry if you're...
No, I'm a Virgo, but like, I get it.
No, I'm kidding.
You're not kidding. That was honest. That was immediate. Are you joking? What did a Leo do to you?
Oh, you don't even want to know. It was a couple of them.
I'm kind of intrigued, but also terrified. Oh my God.
No, actually, in reality, it's more just a lot of trust your gut, because I did a lot of second guessing. Just be like, well, what if I'm not actually this, or what if I can't do this? When your gut tells you just do it, do it. In the last couple of years, I have started trusting my gut more. When I started getting closer to Ontario and feeling all that dread, being in Ontario and being like, this is not right for me anymore. You're gonna be the person that you're with at the end of the day. You're gonna be the person that knows best what's best for you.
Not me still trying to like be composed after your little like Leos, they suck.
They do. Like, they're fantastic friends because they're fun and outgoing and like they're wicked, but like in relationships they just, sorry to all the Leos watching, but like
not to generalize, but bestie.
It's okay, I'm a Gemini, so like I'm not much better.
Oh, okay. I did like have a brief thing with a Gemini once, and that was a little trepidatious. So yeah, it goes both ways apparently. I had a comment on one of my videos recently from a parent, and she was talking about how her child is, I don't know, 12 or something, and came out as non-binary. And a lot of the family's response was very much, how can you know that? You're so young. I kind of answered the question, but I more so was like, I'm actually interviewing a bunch of people that, you know, identify as non-binary and trans. And since this is their life experience, I feel like they could speak to it a little easier. What would you maybe say in support of that mom?
If a kid is telling you that they feel a certain way, it's because they just know. Kids don't have any preconceived notion or language for what they're feeling. So just listen. That's going to be the most important thing you can do. And any sort of support, like if they were commenting on your thing, I assume that they're being supportive.
Yeah.
Or at least they want to be. It's just follow the journey with them. Let them trust their own gut, because they're going to know what's best for them. When I was finally kind of figuring out the non-binary thing, it was because like I just really never felt like a cis woman. I grew up playing with, you know, Tonka trucks and trains and dinosaurs, or like all things that would be considered, you know, like cis male kind of like kid things to do, even though I'm very big on things don't have to be gendered. Just let your kid express themselves, really. Like, as much as I kind of have talked shit on my mom, that's one thing that she did kind of let me do. Never really questioned like why I wanted to wear a tie and a dress shirt to school with fingerless gloves.
I would probably say the exact same thing that you did to this parent. My experience as a queer woman is different, but if I look back at all those emotions I felt as a young kid, they all came from true sources. If you're not into girls or whatever it is, you're not going to be attracted to girls. At the end of the day, this child knows what they're feeling in their heart. You don't need an academic study to know that.
Yeah, exactly. Academic studies are also done on completely different people, you know? They're not that kid in that moment.
And if that family and that kid is watching this, I hope that they know that they have a found family out there waiting for them when they're ready, that will see them and support them. And even here in this moment, like, the identity that you have is so valid.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very big on like protect all queer youth. Like,
yes,
them. They're so important. This was wonderful. I had a really good time. It was fantastic talking with you, and you know, meeting a fellow Filipino friend.
No, I was gagged. I was so gagged when you told me that.
We're dreamers.